Hello, my name's Catherine. Welcome to Rose Floral School, the show. This is where we help your wedding floral design business be more enjoyable and less stressful. So today we are going to talk a little bit about my workflow as far as the paperwork in my business goes. So all the nitty-gritty stuff that I would rather not have to think about, but it is part of owning a business and being a business owner and a floral designer. So we are going to talk about it. I will say I'm going to start, and probably most of this episode will be pertaining to my workflow during the wedding season, the typical in-season flow, which honestly is at a minimum 6 months. Usually it's a little bit longer than 6 months just because of the lead time is a month ahead for most weddings, or 2 months ahead even. So almost all of this, unless I say it specifically, is for during wedding season or the shoulder of wedding season. But I think at the end I'll touch a little bit on how this all works in the off season. So typically I think I'll start with just talking about what paperwork I have to do in general. So it kind of goes almost along a timeline with the client. And actually, I think the next episode that will come out is going to be kind of like a workflow timeline with the client. Like first is the quote, then the proposal, then the contract. All of that will be laid out in the next episode. But just to give you a sneak preview, a lot of my paperwork does sort of follow like a life cycle with the client around their wedding date. So some of the paperwork I might have to do would be things, of course, like answering emails, replying to inquiries, and then all of the steps that go along with that, like preparing for the consultation, having it, quoting the wedding, emailing the brides or grooms, after that, between that point and booking, making them the contract, making their proposal, finalizing their order, making their final order, sending them all the documents that they need leading up to their wedding. I'd say those are like the main bulk of my paperwork. So it's mostly like client relations or client communications. But then there are some other things like, making the recipes, which that's more backend. It's not so much client communication, but it's my backend that I have to do in order to communicate with the client. Placing orders with wholesale. What other paperwork do I tend to do? Things like creating social media posts, creating podcast episodes, which maybe as a floral designer, I don't do as much. Mostly I do that for education purposes, but creating Instagram posts for sure is a big one. Doing things like website updates, all of that good stuff. So typically during the wedding season, almost every Monday I sort of have designated as paperwork day, get my head on straight day. The weekend with the weddings is usually a blur between the wedding itself, the wedding cleanup and aftermath, and then just trying to enjoy my weekend. So by Monday, I'm sort of getting reoriented and looking at the week ahead. So I will typically take Monday, look ahead at my calendar, see if I have any consultations coming up that week that I need to prep for. I will go through my inbox and make sure there's nothing that was left, especially if it was a busy wedding week. My return time on emails gets a little bit laggy, so I'll try to go through and scroll back a bit if there was something that came through Thursday or Friday and I was just in wedding mode, so I kind of put them on the back burner. I'll go through my inbox and check through that and reply to all the emails that need replies. And then I typically check my, I call it my 2-month out weddings, I guess. So I have a chart, of course, of all my weddings, and so I'll go and see which ones have ticked into that 1.5 to 2 month out stage, and I'll go through and email those couples. So I have an email that I send to every couple, again, anywhere from the 1.5 to 2 month out range. So I typically send a batch of these about every other week. I mostly do that, so that I don't have to do it every single week. So I'll send 2 or 3 or sometimes 4, just depending on my schedule at a time. So it'll be all the weddings from 1.5 months out to 2 months out. And I send each of those couples their emails at that time. And like I said, I try to sort of group them together. So I'm doing that every other Monday. Just because that's what I prefer, I guess. So I'll go through and do that. And at the same time, I'll look at my last batch of 2 month outs that I have sent and see what the follow-up is. Usually during the week they've said like, oh, here's our final thing, or they have their last tweaks. So those weddings I'll follow up with who have already gotten that initial 2-month out email. So it's a lot of email follow-up. And with that too, if a bride has, finalized her order and she's ready, her payment's on the way, she's got all the final forms sent in, then I'll go ahead and start printing out her recipe sheets and getting all of my paperwork ready for her file for her wedding week. So a lot of that happens on Mondays, especially if I've had their payment checks come in over the weekend. Before I deposit their check, I like to do all the organization work of getting their files ready, their recipes ready for wedding week. It's just kind of like my own little, almost like reward system. Like, all right, you've got to get all your ducks in a row first, get the file ready, and then we can, deposit that check. It's just sort of like a little motivator for me, I guess. And it's a way to keep myself accountable that I'm not just putting the checks in the bank and then letting the work pile up. So that is another thing that I tend to do a lot on Mondays. Even if the checks have come through on a Tuesday or Wednesday, a lot of times I'll sort of wait until that next Monday to go through that paperwork. I usually will email the bride right away to let her know that I received the payment. But sometimes I will wait and do the filing and organizing on my paperwork day Monday, just because of how wedding weeks tend to be pretty busy Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So those are a lot of the things that I typically do on Mondays. And then throughout the week, the way that I like to do it, again, assuming it's a wedding week, we'll say a typical Saturday wedding, so flowers come in on Wednesday. So then throughout the week, I do keep tabs on my inbox. On Tuesday in the morning, I probably will check my inbox and see if there is anything I want to shoot a reply back to quick since it's early in the week. Wednesday, I might do the same thing in a little bubble of time if I'm waiting for wholesale to come, or just taking a second if there's an email maybe from one of those 2-month out brides who just had a quick question, I can just email her back quickly. I'll do that. But for the most part, I would say Monday I'll be pretty good at answering emails. Tuesday, Wednesday maybe, again, maybe we finish processing the flowers and we have some extra time Wednesday. I usually will skim through my inbox then. But to be honest, by Thursday, Friday, I'm not paying quite as much attention to my inbox. I'll still scan emails as they come in, but for the most part, during wedding season, an email that comes in on a Thursday or Friday is pretty much going to get answered Monday, with exceptions. If it's that week's bride, I obviously answer that immediately. Even if it's the next week, any bride within that month is probably going to get a reply no matter what day she emails me, in 24 hours or less. I will also say, if it's a quick question, I just want to shoot an answer back, whatever, something like that, I would go ahead and email. But if it's something that I have to go through and adjust a proposal or, rework a quote or something like that, I might, use my discretion and leave that for Monday. Same thing with inquiries. I will say, if an inquiry came in on a Wednesday, I'll probably try to reply before Friday. If it's on Thursday or Friday, I might leave that for the weekend. But if it is a date or a venue that I really, really want to book, I'll go ahead and email them back. It's easy enough. I've got a template for that. So it's just a matter of checking my calendar, pretty much copy pasting the email, adding a few details, personalized to that couple, and then I can reply and, keep that communication as non-delayed as we can. So that's sort of my workflow as far as emails go. Most of the paperwork pretty much is, I would say, pretty loaded on Mondays. And then I'm trying to think what else. Little things I will do throughout the week, depending, the week of the wedding, I emailed the photographer for that wedding just to touch base, let them know a few details. So I'll typically email the photographer of that weekend's wedding on the Wednesday. It's one of my checklist items while I'm doing that first processing day of flowers. It's email the photographer. So I'll do that usually on that Wednesday. And then I would say that's the bulk of the sort of paperwork jobs that I do during a wedding week. Now, something that I actually literally just am starting is what I'm calling an admin day. So what I had been doing previously, this is pretty much all social media related. So what I had been doing was batching my social media posts, either in 1 month chunks, or even sometimes I was doing like up to 3 months batched at a time. So where I'm making, taking the photo and putting the photos together in one single email with the caption written out and the hashtags and the vendor tags, all of that right there. And I would just make 10, 20, 30 of them at a time and send them to myself and keep just like stockpiling them in an email. So I was doing that, and honestly, I don't feel like for floral designers, I don't think that's, I think that's all right. It was pretty straightforward. It was the same process every time. And I was able to stack a bunch up pretty easily. But what I found for me was that I was doing those posts, but then I'm also doing my Rose Floral School posts, which include different like Canva image graphics and different style graphics with image. There's one with an image and one with just text, and different reels and all of that, the podcast. So I found that batching all of this and all my design content 3 months in 3-month blocks basically created, first of all, like 4 really long days in a row of creating content, which for me was draining, to just be making content day after day after day. Even though it is the off season right now while I'm doing this, it got to be draining for me as a person who wants to work with their hands. So that was the first problem. The other problem was that, and again, I think this would pertain to some people. It depends on how your mind works and what exactly you're doing. But I found that because I had all these different formats and different types of posts and types of content that I was creating, it was a slightly different process for each type. And if I did a whole bunch for 3 months, that was all fine and dandy. But 3 months later, when I caught up, I couldn't even remember how exactly I did that. What was the process? What was the font? What was the, how did I create that graphic in that way? And I have templates and I have things like that, which help a ton. But it still was almost like having to relearn it every time and then have 4 grueling days of content creation in a row, which was not fun for me. And I will also say I felt a bit of a disconnect with my content. So all that to say, what I'm doing now is every 3 weeks, I am having an admin day where I basically create 3 weeks worth of content. So this is for my design and my education side of my businesses. So for you, most likely it's just going to be the design side, but going ahead and creating all of those captions, picking out which images you want to share, even like brainstorming reels if there's things that you want to do that you need to create the content for still, like actually film the footage, doing some brainstorming for that and a little bit of like planning ahead, things like that are super helpful, and that's part of what I'm doing. Then I'm also doing, of course, the podcast and the Rose Floral School posts. But doing it once every 3 weeks, like I said, this is a new sort of setup for me, which I'm hoping will help it be a lot more, I don't know, just that I can get in a groove with it and not be like 100% in and then 100% clocked out for 3 months and then having to like reorient myself every 3 months to relearn the process, basically. I'm hoping to do it in the smaller bites, keep it a little more consistent, feel more connected with my content, and just be able to have it feel like it flows a bit better. And it's a little bit less like all or nothing, sink or swim. Because I was feeling really great in one moment where it's like, I've got 3 months of content made. That's wonderful. How amazing. But then all of a sudden those 3 months would fly by, as they do. And I'd be left with this sinking feeling of like, oh my gosh, I'm coming up like next week. I have to make 3 months of content. And it sounded so daunting and grueling. And that's when I realized I needed a better way. So yeah, and I do think though separating my admin day from my like Monday almost like maintenance paperwork does feel good too. I can get into different mindsets and be like in a certain mode. I won't feel like this pressure to be creating all my content and like these emails are getting in my way, because I don't want to have that like friction between where my energy and time is being spent. So separating them, I'm feeling like it's going to be great. And if I didn't already say it, or if I did and you forgot, my admin days are set for Tuesdays right now, every 3 weeks. And my other thought is that if on a Monday I get through that like urgent, in the moment, keep the wheels rolling kind of paperwork, if I get through that quickly, then I can jump in and get a head start on my admin day, which is more of almost like the deep work and the marketing side of the paperwork that comes with running your own business. So that's part of why I picked those days and kind of set it up that way. And so I'm excited to sort of keep on going with this admin day and see what kind of flow we get in. But today, the day that I'm filming this at least, not the day you're listening, but today was my first official admin day, and I feel like it went really well. I did get into that good flow, and I think it's just going to get better every single time. So that's what I'm doing right now as far as keeping up with like the weekly, daily sort of paperwork needs, and then those like every 3 weeks sort of marketing, content creation types of paperwork. And then just briefly, I will hit on some other things too, like the almost once a year paperwork. So for me, of course, then you've got for everybody, you've got your bookkeeping, your like tax paperwork, your financial things. What I do, and honestly, I think you have to know yourself, know your style, know what works for you. What I do, because I know that I'm pricing appropriately and I feel rock solid on my pricing strategy, I actually don't technically keep my books every single month or week. I do it all at the end of the year. So each wedding, I will of course check that my estimated expenses or COGS or wholesale costs, whatever you want to call it, I'll check that matches my actual wholesale bill. So I do keep tabs on it. I'm not just going totally willy-nilly, and you should not go totally willy-nilly either. So there are some checks and balances, but I don't actually put all my expenses into the spreadsheet until literally the end of the year. Typically, it's like the middle of December. I'll go through and enter in all my receipts and all my expenses and all my contracts and incomes and use my big giant spreadsheet to see my like end of year totals and numbers. Now, again, I've been doing this for a while. I know what margins to expect, and I estimate all of that ahead of time. And I go through, like with all my contracts, I have a spreadsheet showing how much I will be making based on contracts, how much I would guess that the cost would be, how much brides will add or remove from their totals, all that I have on a sheet. So I'm not just like hoping I make money. I'm planning on making money, and I can give you a pretty good estimate of how much it will be. But all of my tax and financial and bookkeeping work I do at the end of the year. So I just find that my brain does not like switching gears. I like to do one thing and just do it for a while, and then maybe move on to another task after, like, I don't know, after I've gotten in the groove, gotten that task done, then I'll move on to the next task. And so having to halt everything to pull out my receipts and enter them into this Excel spreadsheet, just it does not jive with me. It doesn't fit my work style. So that's why I do that. And as long as you have a solid pricing strategy, you are checking and balancing your numbers in some way, I think that's fine. So that's what I do as far as that type of paperwork. And then I think the only other there's a million little tasks, but the other big admin task would be sort of like website updates, things like that. And typically I do that during my off season, like January, February. I'll usually get photos from the weddings from the year past, and that's when I'll go through my website and do some updates. I like to do the big stuff, get the things out of the way that just aesthetically are not jiving anymore, things that just look dated or don't align with my brand anymore. Go through and take care of those big things, take care of the things in the copy that don't make sense if it's a policy I used to do or new pricing, whatever it is, go through and take care of all those big things. And then I do have a list that once I get a chance, in these little pieces of time during this on season, I'll go and chip away, like updating the galleries. That can take a while. But I have that on sort of like I don't know what you'd call it, like a on deck list, maybe. I don't know what you want to call it, but I have a list. And during the wedding season, when I do have staff during the week, I sort of have that list of almost like, not that they're tedious, but they are these like tedious tasks that will suck up a lot of my time. But I would rather just wait on them and have my staff help me out with them if there's like a lull, if there's just a week where I don't need as much help with the wedding, but I still want to bring them on for their regular hours. They can chip away at those types of tasks that are just kind of repetitive, important, but not as urgent as something, the big stuff in your website that I mentioned a second ago. So I think those are the main paperwork tasks and how I handle everything. I guess I did sort of touch on the off season with some of those tasks, like the bookkeeping things, the website things. Otherwise, I still, even in the off season, Mondays tend to be my heaviest like paperwork day. Like I said, that every third Tuesday is going to be my admin day. We'll see how it goes, adjust if needed, but that's the plan right now. And then in the off season, I still, of course, check my emails almost every morning, unless I have appointments or I'm just doing something like maybe I'm taking a day to just do house projects or like non-business things, because I do try to take close to a day off every week in the off season to do things like that, house projects, help out with family, touch base with friends. I try to make time for that in my off season as well, since of course we do work a lot of Saturdays in the summertime. But yeah, so that's just a little look at what my paperwork kind of back end workflow looks like. If you want to call it paperwork, bookwork, whatever you would like to call it, that is a little peek at what mine looks like. So hopefully this was helpful. If there's something that you're working on, please let me know. I would love to talk about it. I don't love doing paperwork, but I do love like figuring out the best way to do it for you. I do like figuring out the like logistics and how to just make it work for you. That's what's been kind of fun about this new like admin day. I'm like, let's make this work for me. And so far so good. So hopefully you can get your back end stuff all kind of worked out and get into a good flow during your off season and your on season, so that you aren't going crazy and having these horrible, grueling paperwork days ahead. So, all right, that's it for this episode. We will see you again soon. If you have a question that you want us to answer on the show, please message me. You can reach out. The best place is probably my DMs on Instagram. It's at rose.floral.school. That's just the best place to reach me because I am still getting the hang of YouTube and Spotify. So reach out if you have a question and we will answer it on the show. And make sure you like, subscribe, follow, all that good stuff. It really would mean the world to me. I'm so excited and I hope you have a good day. Bye.